Mm-hmm. Why, is there something you don't want to say?
What? Too late now.
Yeah. Okay.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Shmuel.
A question. Yesterday we were talking about if a person doesn't have money to pay his poel,
Yes.
as at least as a Midas Hasidus, he should give him, let's say, something of value, a watch or whatever.
Right.
How would post-dated checks be considered here? Because it really doesn't have value. The intrinsic value is just a piece of paper.
Right. So a post-dated check is sort of like an IOU. It's a promissory note. And it's a good question whether or not that fulfills one's obligation. That's a very good question. What if you just give them a promissory note, a shtar, that's worth the value of collection? Perhaps that would be sufficient. I don't know. It's a good question. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so the whole theme of this halacha was, the previous halacha was dealing with a schir yom, and now we're dealing with a kabbalan, a person who's hired to do a job. And we said that payment is due as soon as the job is finished. And then we said, but that's only if he delivers the goods. But if he tells you to come pick it up, there's an understanding that you don't have an obligation to pick it up right away. You can pick it up at your convenience, and only when you pick it up do you have an obligation to pay. Okay, so let's take a look at this long piece. I don't know if we'll go through the whole thing, but let's see where he starts us off with. Kablan shiputzim shekibel al atzmo levatzea avoda shel shiputz bekach maz. Okay, so you have a person who's a repairman, and he's accepted upon himself to repair maybe he's a furniture repairman, a carpenter, or an appliance repairman. Okay, and he's accepted upon himself to repair a certain appliance or unit for a certain amount of money. And they set up a time when he's going to begin his work. And he accepted upon himself to do the work. He starts on time, and in the middle of the job, he stops. He's a person who does shiputzim also is a person who does renovation in a person's house. Shiputzim are renovations. So he's getting his house renovated. He's, let's say, adding on a room to his house, or he's reconfiguring a section of his home. And all of a sudden, the contractor stops working in the middle of the job. The balabayas is left with an upheaval in his home. And now, also, because a portion of the house is open to the elements, the argument is, if you don't finish by wintertime, when the rain is coming, and in Toronto it would be snow, I'm going to get a huge financial loss. And at the same time, the kablan contractor keeps pushing him off. Oh, I had to take care of this week. I'm sorry. I'll come next week. And then next week it's another excuse. Is it permitted for me, al pi halacha, to take a new contractor to resume work? And do I have a right to deduct what I owed to the first person, and give that to the second person? So imhanal ya'aleh biyoker shehukra hamalacha. If the, let's see, Im Rashai Lenakot Mischar Harishon Latet Lasheni, Imanal Yale Biyoker Shu Kremalacha, because the second guy is going to be raising is going to be charging more, I think is what he's saying. And so therefore I need to deduct the added price that I have to pay to hire the second guy, and I have to take that away from what I owe the first guy. Ubereshit devarenu nivarer be'ezrat Hashem yitbarach, eicha din heicha shehakablan chazer bo legamrei ve'eino rotze l'sayim avodato. So first let's clarify, what will be the din when the contractor basically just drops everything and refuses to finish the work? Hinei lekaman seif chaf alef beviurim diramasel bein b'schirus nitbarer dedavka b'pol shuhu schir yom kamelon shuhu chozer be'emsa avodato. So the first thing that we need to establish is that only a day laborer, person who works by the day, not by the job, has a right to quit at will. Anyone can quit at will. If I work for you by the day and not by the job, so then every day is a new, almost like a new contract. Every day is a new day, right? So that's number one. Aval kablan asur lachzor bo. But if a person had contracted to do a job, and he wants to stop in the middle, that he's not allowed to do. From the muchach b'gemara, ba'afilu b'schir sherashai lachzor be'emtza, anu davka shechozer stam. Aval im chozer mikoch yoker shematza avodato yoter shemishalman lo yoter eno rashai. And furthermore, there may be mitigating circumstances that allow a kablan, even a schir yom who's allowed to quit in the middle. That's only davka shechozer stam. That's if he wants to quit. Aval im chozer mikoch yoker. But if he wants to quit because he found a better work where he can get paid more, that he's not allowed to do. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why a person can't quit his present job in order to get a job that's worth that where he can get paid more. That doesn't seem to make sense. I don't understand why he's saying that a person is not allowed to quit his job in order to get a better paying job. But let's see. And we found came okay, this is a bit of a complicated issue. It seems like he ends up with Sarachian, but the bottom line is that a Sachir is allowed to quit after the end of the day, but a Kablan is not. Amnam hadam reading the Kablan eno rashai lachzor bo, hainu im kvar hitchil b'malacha. But let's clarify further. When we say that a Kablan is not allowed to quit in the middle of a job, that's provided that he's already started. Or if they made a kinyan, they signed a contract, or they made some other form of kinyan that makes it legally binding for the contractor to follow through on his commitment. And the Noda B'Yehuda says that even if there was no formal kinyan, but there was a drafting of a contract, even at that point, he's not allowed to go back on his word. So he says, as long as the contract is signed, there don't even need to be witnesses. The purpose of witnesses is to be able to counter a claim that a person already paid the contract. But a contract is legally binding once both parties sign it. But a shtar that is signed by two parties to enter into an agreement doesn't need witnesses in order for it to be legally binding to make that contract, to require both parties to follow through on their contractual commitment. Now, what would be if the kablan did not make a kinyan? There was no formal contract signed, but the contractor started bringing 2x4s and dropping them off at the house of the balabas. Can he go back at that point? Nire, the lichora pligi bazeh hataz v'Rebbi Akiva Eiger. He says this is a machlokus between the Taz and Rabbi Akiva Eiger. The Hataz Kosav Beresh Siman Shin Lamed Gimel. The Taz writes that Vizel Shono, and there he's talking about where there's a balabayas, let's say, makes a kinyan by taking hold of a screwdriver or a hammer that belongs to the contractor. So that's sort of like a way of affecting a kinyan. He says, "Nira lanios daiti hu adinim lo mashach rak shenasna lechatzer shel balabayas kana habalabayas." He says, it would seem to me that even if there was no exchange, no official kinyan, but goods were dropped off at the house of the balabayas, that also allows the balabais to make a kinyan on those objects, and that creates a contract. The Rishu Sokona Kamo Mashicha. Mashma b'Mordechai Periko Umin Dechol Shahi Kfar Derech Bikadon Etzlo Lo Mahani Midi LeInyan Zeh Ad Kam Lashona. He says, and it seems from the Mordechai that Dechol Shahi Kfar Derech Bikadon Etzlo Lo Mahani Midi LeInyan Zeh. Hare de Kasav Dim Nasan HaKablan Kela So Chatzer Balabayis Havalei Kinyan Shen Rashai Lachzor Bo. So once the contractor puts goods in the courtyard of the balabayas, neither party is allowed to go back on the deal. That too is a commitment on the part of both parties. And then he writes from Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Let me just skip a little bit. Because he's going into a little bit of a lot of detail. Okay, let's skip down to over here. Vihine, b'makom shechazar bo hakablan. It's about 20 lines down. Vihine, b'makom shechazar bo hakablan ve'eino rotzeh l'sayem avodato. Now, when the contractor quits in the middle of the job and doesn't want to finish his job, kaimelan d'shamin lo masha asid la'asos. So we estimate how much work is left for the kablan to do. Ketzad. For example, kibel mimenu kama liktzor bishmona dinarim. So, for example, let's say I hire a farmer. I hire someone to harvest my crop, and I said, okay, when you harvest this field, I'll pay you 8 dinars. Katzar chetzia v'hinei chetzia. So if he only harvests half the field, so then oyim kibel beged le'erog bishmona slime, or if I hire you to weave me a garment. And I'm going to pay you 8 sellers. And he only wove half a garment, and the other half is just still in the loom, waiting to be woven. So shaman lo masha asid lasos, we estimate how much work needs to be left done and what someone would charge to finish that work. Im hayashava sheish dinarim. So for example, it would cost me 6 dinars in order to hire someone to finish the job. A full field, I would pay 8 dinars. But to find someone to do just half a field, I'd have to pay the guy 6 dinars. So how much do I owe the kablan? I owe him 2 dinars. Because you were supposed to do the job for 8. I need to hire someone for 6 to finish your work. So therefore, I only have to pay you 2. That's the general halacha when it comes to a kablan. He is at a disadvantage if he quits in the middle. Oh, yigmer was malachton, or finish your work and I'll pay you the full 8. Upirish hadover dim eno motzi abalabayis kablan acher shemuchan l'sayim et havoda b'mechir shekava harishon. Meaning, I can't find someone who will do the half the job for the same price that you would have done it. Dahainu sheyikach avor gemar chetzi sheni shel malacha daladinarim az rashai likach kablan shu motzi af shu yoter biyoker biyorid mitashlum shu tzarich l'shalom rishon sachasikum shalolokate biyoker kablan hasheni. Okay, he's just reiterating. V'im kain lefi hanal pashut. So based on that, it seems quite obvious to Rashaya Balabayis Lakachas Kablan Sheni, Ulahashlam Avodas Harishon Shehipsik Bo. So therefore, clearly, if a contractor keeps delaying and pushing me off, and now winter's going to be here in another month, I'm allowed to hire another contractor who's going to charge me much more. Okay? And even though let's say I owe the previous contractor $10,000 for work that he's already done, but I need to hire another guy for $15,000 to finish the job, I can deduct whatever I owed from, let's see. Yeah. He's got to finish the job, but he's only going to do it for 15 grand. So I can deduct, and the whole job was going to be 20 grand. I only have to pay the first contractor 5 grand because he left me hanging. And the Shach goes as far to say that even if I end up paying him nothing, the first contractor, because I'm going to have to hire another guy who's going to charge me the full amount, the $20,000, just to finish half of what this guy started. And that happens a lot of times, because what if the first guy got started and certain things have to be undone, and the other contractor doesn't like the workmanship and stuff like that. He may actually tell me that I need to do a lot of this over again, and it's going to cost the same amount. B'din zenamar afilu be'eno davar ha'ave, and that's true. Even if we're not dealing with a situation where if it's not done right away, I'm going to end up losing money, right? That was the case where the balabas says, I need you to finish this work before winter because the house is not insulated now. Half the house is open to the elements. That's for sure a davar ha'avid. That's for sure going to cause financial loss. But when it comes to where there's going to be a financial loss, like in our case, we can go even further to penalize the original contractor. So the Shulchan Aruch writes, "Bamed dvarim amurim b'davar she'eino avid, aval b'davar ha'avid kagon pishtan lahalos me'ah mishra." The example that the Shulchan Aruch gives is that I hired someone to process flax. Now, flax, what you do is you soak it in a certain kind of vat, okay, and then after a certain time of processing, you have to pull it out. And this guy basically disappears. He put it in the vat, and he disappears. Now, if it remains in the vat for an excessive period of time, the flax will get ruined. So he needs to know how to do it and how to pull it out. It requires a professional to do this. Or let's say I hired a donkey driver to bring instruments to play for a funeral procession or for a bride. So, and then the guy, echad poel v'echad kablan eni yochel lachzor bo. In those situations, because I've booked you for a specific event, you're not allowed to back out of the deal. Ela im kein ne'enas kagon shechala, unless there's a real mishap, like you get sick. V'im lo ne'enas v'chazor bo, but if it's not because of sickness, im haya motzei polim acherim lischar kishesocher es elu v'achshav eino motzei socher aleihem o mata'an. So the Shulchan Aruch says that Keitzad socher leim polim v'gomrim malachtam shelo tovad, that I have a right in those situations where it's timely, that I need to get the work done at a specific time. I'm allowed to hire other workers to finish the job because the guy quit on me. Chol sheyosef leilo ha'po'alim ha'acherim al masha pasak larishonim notel me harishonim ad kedei scharan shel rishonim. And anything that I have to pay more because it's last minute booking for these other people, I'm allowed to deduct from the original workers. So perishtim sachru lahapoel harishon b'shnei dinarim liyom. So for example, if I hired a worker and I told him I'm going to pay you 2 dinars per day, the chazer be'emtza hayom, and then he quits in the middle of the day, sochar aleim v'nosem lahasheni ad kedei hakefel b'schar harishon dahayna arba dinarim k'mo shekasav harambam, that I'm allowed to give the second guy up to double of what I hired the first guy for. I'm even allowed to sue them, and I can force them to pay, like even if I haven't paid the first worker, but he's compelled me to pay double the price to another worker because it was a last minute thing. I can actually sue the first worker for the difference. Right. So that nezek tsar ripui boshes is all for bodily harm.
No, I understand. Where's the
Right. Where's the pain and suffering? Yeah. Yeah.
And the house is not finished in time.
Right.
Because you got another job.
Right.
We're just saying you can pay someone else more money and not pay him for the balance. What about the, there's no tangible.
Materials and labor, because I think in the example that you gave, if the additional pattern has delivered materials to the site,
Right.
for whatever reason, the job. And the other guy comes in and has to compete. The job, and it costs more than the materials and the labor. It seems to me that the first guy who delivered the materials could be out of pocket for that.
He could be out of pocket for those materials. But yeah, I mean, not only could he be out of pocket for those materials, but it could be that I'm even allowed to sue him if he left me hanging and I had to pay a lot more to finish the job on time. So I could sue him, but there's no punitive damages, right? It's only a question of what more did I end up having to pay in order to get the job finished. Okay, so let's skip a little bit. It turns out, according to this, the kablan shiputzim shechozer bo mafsik avodato, that if I hired a contractor who decides to back out of the deal in the middle of the job, rashai balabayis lahazmin kablan acher ligmor avodato, so the balabayis is allowed to hire another contractor to finish the work. V'im eno motzi b'mechir shel harishon uchagon shenit yaker ha'avoda. And let's say the prices have gone up in the interim, which happens quite frequently, that building materials go up and labor goes up, inflation and all these things that we're seeing now. Yachol lakachet gam yoter biyoker, biyorid mischar hakablan harishon kol ma shetzorach lahosif lahasheni. Then I have a right to deduct from what I owe the first guy for the job that he's done up to date, and deduct that from what I owe him. And that means even if the first contractor will end up getting nothing from me, because all of it has to be used to pay the second contractor, that's also legal. But it would seem to me, he says, that it's only for the labor costs and the first contractor's profit that I'm allowed to deduct. But the materials, going to Lloyd's question, but what about the materials? What if he spent $1,000 in materials, and that's part of the $10,000 that I owe him? Then it depends. If it's something that the balabayas didn't need right away, and the worker just basically is taking his time and dragging his feet, and he's saying, I will get it done, I will get it done. So then if the Balabayas chooses to hire a new contractor, then he cannot subtract the actual building material costs. But if it's a davar ha'aved, if winter's coming and he needs to finish the job on time, so then he's even allowed to deduct the building materials. Da'az kaimelan shesocher aleim ad 45 zuzim hayamam tachas yadu kanal. V'lachein im hayanelatz lakachat kablan acher limnoa hefsed uchagon shayach shashi yabo gisham l'chom v'yasidim amono az yachol laharid afilu midmei hachomer shishki hakablan harishon. He says, if winter's coming and the house is half exposed, so then I'm even allowed to deduct the building materials. If it's not a davar ha'aved, so then I'm only allowed to deduct the labor costs and his profit, but I cannot deduct the building materials. So, and then he goes and he says that there's more of a machlokes, but he says, V'hinei akati yesh la'ayin, heicha she'en hakablan harishon chozer bo legamre. Now, what about a scenario which is quite common, that the first contractor is not completely quitting, okay? But he keeps saying mañana, mañana, machar, machar, okay? He said, oh no, of course I'm going to finish the job. Of course I'm coming, but I'll be here next week. Well, a balabayas nigram agmas nefesh v'tzar machmazeh. This is Moshe's question. And the balabayas is tearing out his kishkas. Hein mishum habilbul v'hamahapecha shegarim shebeveito yesh iseder v'lichluch kematzoi be'emtza shiputz. It could be because the house is in upheaval and it's dirty and it's gross and he's got to come home every day to all of this sawdust and plastic and everything's in upheaval. Or because he doesn't have room to work in the house. It's a tremendous inconvenience to the people living in his home. Is that considered a timely financial loss, where if you're not going to do it in a timely fashion, I have a right to deduct even building materials? Do I at least have the right to hire another contractor to finish the job, since you're dragging your feet? So Rabbi Kiva Eger writes that if I give, let's say, a garment to a tailor to repair, and something happens that the weaver, the tailor, gets sick and he can't finish the job, yesh lomar the ena balabayis yochol litlo mimenu. The yochol lomar lo schir yom ana ve'eselecha puula achar avor haones. The tailor can say to him, you have no right to take the garment from me and withdraw what you owe me by hiring another tailor, because I have a legitimate excuse. I wasn't able to do it. I got sick. You just have to be patient and wait until I can finish the job. Unless the Balabais makes a claim that I specifically need that for the upcoming Yontif or for my child's wedding or something like that. So what we see from here is that you're allowed to take away the work from the poel, from the worker, even if the poel has a legitimate reason for having to interrupt the work. But if the balabayas needs the job done in a timely way for whatever reason, he's allowed to take the work away from him and demand whatever work product he's done to date. He's allowed to take it to another tailor. But it's not there. The question is not what can be deducted from the first worker's labor. Because in that situation, since he's an oines, he's entitled to full compensation, at least for the work that he's done. He says, but what we do see is that if a guy is delaying, and he's not delivering what he promised in a timely fashion, I do have a right to fire him, even though he keeps giving me excuses as to why he's delayed. I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. I don't want to hear that the wife is sick. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that. Because even though I may be sympathetic to the personal stuff you're going through in life, but I can't live like this anymore. I've got to move on. It is because even though normally you're not allowed to stop willy-nilly fire a person that you hired without cause, but here you do have cause, and therefore you're allowed to. So we'll have to hold it here for today, and we'll Mir Hashem a few more things we need to look at, but in Mir Hashem we'll have to continue. Unfortunately, I'm away next week. I'm traveling all next week. I won't be back until Tuesday morning, a week from Tuesday. So I'll be in touch with you via WhatsApp, and we'll commence Amir Hashem in about a week and a half. Okay?
Right, Rabbi. Good Erev Shabbos.
I'm leaving Monday, and I'm returning the following Monday night. I'm gone for 8 days. No. Thanks. Headed to LA. Okay. See you later.